I think I'd respect you more if you actually had something impressive going for you, she said in front of her friends during dinner. I smiled, finished my drink, and quietly left. Months later, those same friends were congratulating me online after my promotion announcement started circulating across the entire industry overnight. I think I'd respect you more if you actually had something impressive going for you. She said it with a smile. Not even a cruel one, just casual, almost bored, like she was commenting on the weather. I felt every word land somewhere deep, somewhere I didn't expect it to reach. And the worst part? Her friends laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just that soft, knowing laugh. The kind that says we all agree but we're too polite to say it ourselves. I picked up my drink, took a slow sip, set it down on the table without a sound. I didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't defend myself. I just smiled back at her. And then I quietly got up, walked out of that restaurant, and never sat at that table again. What happened in the months that followed? I couldn't have predicted it sitting in that moment. But that night changed something in me that I still can't fully explain. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. We'd been together for 2 years. I was 28. She was 26. We lived in the same city, different apartments, close enough that it felt like a life, but separate enough that it wasn't quite one yet. Her name was Kennedy. Looking back, I should have noticed things earlier. There were signs, subtle ones, the kind you see so clearly in hindsight that you almost laugh at how blind you were. But I wasn't blind exactly. I think I just chose not to look. Kennedy had a way of making you feel like the problem was always yours to fix. Not through screaming or cruelty. She was too composed for that. It was more like she operated at a frequency that made you constantly feel like you were falling slightly short of something unspoken. Like a standard she'd set inside her own head, never shared with you, but one you'd somehow still be judged against. I didn't see it for what it was at first. I called it ambition. I called it standards. I called it the kind of drive that pushes people forward. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to understand that what she actually had was contempt. She had dressed it up beautifully, but underneath all that polish, contempt. I worked in logistics and supply chain consulting. Not glamorous. Not the kind of job that made people at dinner parties lean forward with interest. When someone asked what I did and I told them, I could watch their attention drift within about 4 seconds. Kennedy knew what I did when we started dating. She said she loved that I was grounded, that I wasn't obsessed with appearances, that I had substance over flash. I believed her. That was my first mistake. Her friend group was a specific kind of New York energy. Addison worked in fashion PR. Everly was a brand strategist for a cosmetics company. There was a guy named Hudson who Kennedy had known since college. Finance, loud opinions, expensive watch, the kind of guy who orders for the table without asking. They were all successful in visible ways. And that visibility mattered to this group more than anything else. I'd spent enough time around them to understand the unspoken rules. What you do defines your value. What your title is defines your personality. What your income looks like determines how much your opinion is worth at the table. I didn't play that game. I never had. But Kennedy played it. And over time, I think she started resenting that I didn't. The dinner happened on a Thursday night in late October. Nothing special about the day, no fight leading up to it, no tension I could point to. We were at a restaurant in the West Village that Addison had picked. The kind of place with no prices on the menu and candles so small they barely light the table. There were 6 of us. Addison, Everly, Hudson, a newer friend of Kennedy's named Colton, finance, of course, newer to the group, but already performing fluently in their language. And then Kennedy and me. The dinner started fine. Wine, bread, the usual catching up that this group did, which mostly consisted of updating each other on their own achievements wrapped in the language of casual conversation. Oh, I just got back from Milan for the Moto launch. Exhausting but amazing. Yeah, we closed that deal finally. Took forever, but the numbers were insane. Did you see that piece they ran about the campaign? The reach was just wild. I sat there, ate my bread, contributed where I could, said nothing where I couldn't. That was usually my role in this group. The quiet one. The one who didn't need to perform. I thought Kennedy appreciated that. I was wrong. It started with a question from Hudson. Simple enough on the surface. He looked over at me and said, "So what's the move for you right now, career-wise? What's the goal?" Reasonable question. Normal question. I told him I was in the middle of a large-scale contract with a regional distribution network. Wouldn't say who, confidentiality, but that it was probably the most complex project I'd worked on. Real systemic restructuring. The kind of thing that takes 18 months minimum to see the results of. Hudson nodded. That polite nod that people do when they've already stopped listening. Cool, he said, and turned back to Everly. I didn't care. I genuinely didn't care. I went back to my food. And then Kennedy said it. Just like that. No build-up. No warning. I think I'd respect you more if you actually had something impressive going for you. Conversational tone. Like she was just saying what the table was already thinking. There was a beat of silence. Then Addison did a small laugh, surprised, a little uncomfortable maybe, but she laughed. Everly looked at her wine. Hudson's mouth pulled into a smirk. Colton looked at me with this expression I'd see later in my memory over and over. Not cruel, almost pitying. The look you give someone who just got publicly embarrassed and doesn't fully realize how bad it was yet. I sat still for a second. I could feel the warmth crawling up the back of my neck. Not anger. Not yet. Something older. Something quieter. I looked at Kennedy. She looked back. No apology in her eyes. Not even awareness that she'd said something wrong. She looked like a person who had just said an obvious truth and was waiting for the world to adjust to it. I picked up my drink. Finished it. Set the glass down without a sound. Then I stood up, folded my napkin, placed it on the table. Excuse me, I said to no one in particular. And I walked out. I didn't make a scene. I want to be clear about that. Not because making a scene would have been wrong, but because it matters to the story. There was no shouting, no dramatic exit speech, no public confrontation. I just left. I got my coat from the front, walked out onto the street, felt the cold October air hit my face, and started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a destination. I just walked. And somewhere in those first few blocks, something shifted inside me, quietly, without ceremony, the way the most important things usually do. I wasn't going back. Not to the restaurant. Not to that table. And not, I realized, to the relationship. Kennedy texted me about 40 minutes later. Where did you go? Then, a few minutes after that. Did you seriously just leave? Then. Okay. Wow. I didn't respond that night. I walked for almost 2 hours. Got a coffee from a late-night place on Bleecker. Sat outside despite the cold. I wasn't replaying the line she said. Not obsessively. Not the way people do when they're spiraling. I was thinking about something else entirely. I was thinking about how unsurprised I was. That was the thing that hit me hardest. It hadn't come out of nowhere. Looking back, that comment, I think I'd respect you more if you actually had something impressive going for you, was just the first time she'd said out loud what I'd been feeling from her for months. Maybe longer. The sighs when I talked about work. The way she'd light up when Hudson talked about his bonus, but go quiet when I talked about a contract win. The subtle redirects at parties when someone asked what I did. Oh, he works in logistics, but he's really great with people. Like she was already pre-apologizing for me. She hadn't respected me in a long time. She'd just been polite about it until she wasn't. We had a conversation 2 days later. She called it a talk. I called it closure. She came to my apartment. Sat on the edge of the couch, like she wasn't planning to stay long. You overreacted, she said. It was just a comment. So then you understand why I think leaving was a bit dramatic? I understand why you see it that way, I said. But I left because I wanted to. Not because I was being dramatic. She looked frustrated. What does that even mean? It means I've heard that comment before, I said. Not in those words. But I felt it from you for a while. And sitting there and finishing dinner after that, I just didn't want to do it. She stared at me. You're ending things over one sentence. No, I said. I'm ending things over 2 years of a feeling that finally had a voice. She left about 15 minutes later. She didn't slam the door. I didn't ask her not to go. It was the quietest ending I'd ever been a part of. I want to tell you that the next few weeks were fine. They weren't. They weren't devastating. I want to be precise here, but they weren't fine either. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from removing something from your life that wasn't good for you. It's not grief exactly. It's more like withdrawal. You keep reaching for a habit and finding empty space. You check your phone less because there's one name you're no longer waiting for. You walk past the places you used to go together and feel something that isn't sadness, but isn't nothing either. I felt that for a few weeks. And then I started working. Not as a distraction. Not as some revenge plot. I started working because I'd been sitting on something for over a year. The project I'd mentioned at dinner, the regional distribution network restructuring, had a layer to it that I hadn't discussed with anyone outside of work. I'd been running analysis on a systemic inefficiency that wasn't just affecting this one client. It was affecting the entire mid-sized logistics sector across the Northeast. The model I developed, slowly, over about 14 months, late nights and spreadsheets and conversations with people twice my age who'd been in the industry for decades, was something I genuinely believed could change how these networks operated. In a real, structural, measurable way. I'd been sitting on it because I wasn't confident enough in myself yet. Because Kennedy's voice, even before that night, had been living in my head, quietly telling me that what I was building wasn't impressive enough to take seriously. After she left, that voice left with her. I don't think she'd appreciate knowing that. But it's the truth. I spent November and December heads down in a way I hadn't been in years. I refined the framework, built out the data model, got 3 people I trusted to stress test it. A former mentor named Ryder who'd built and sold 2 supply chain companies, a friend named Easton who worked in operations research at a university, and a senior analyst at my firm who was so sharp it was almost uncomfortable to be in meetings with her. All 3 of them came back with variations of the same thing. This is real. This is worth something. Don't sit on it. I didn't. I submitted an internal proposal to my firm in mid-December. The meeting was scheduled for the first week of January. That meeting lasted 3 hours. I'd expected 45 minutes. By the end of it, there were 6 people in the room, and a call had been placed to someone in our leadership team who was at a conference in another city. 2 weeks later, I had an offer on the table. Not just recognition of the framework, they wanted to build an entire division around it. VP of Supply Chain Innovation. I'd never held a VP title. I was 28 years old. I sat in my apartment the night I got the offer letter and held the paper for a long time. Not because I was shocked exactly, but because I understood something in that moment that I want to try to articulate carefully. The work had always been there. The capability had always been there. What changed was that I finally stopped filtering myself through someone else's opinion of what impressive looked like. I accepted the offer on a Monday in late January. The announcement went through internal channels first, the usual company communication, my name and new title, and a brief description of the initiative. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly it moved outside the company. Ryder, who had contacts everywhere in the industry, shared the announcement. A logistics trade publication picked it up. Then a larger industry newsletter ran a short profile. By the second day, I was getting LinkedIn notifications faster than I could read them. Hundreds of them. Connections I hadn't spoken to in years. Recruiters. People from competitor firms. Former professors. A few names I only recognized because I'd read their work. Within 48 hours, my name was in front of people across the entire supply chain sector. I didn't expect it, but I won't pretend I didn't feel something reading those messages. And then came the ones I didn't expect. Addison sent a message on the 3rd day. Hey, I saw the news about your promotion. That's huge, congratulations. Seriously. Everly left a comment on the LinkedIn post. Congrats. This is amazing news. Even Hudson, who had turned away from me mid-sentence at that dinner table in October, sent a connection request with a note attached. Impressive stuff. Would love to grab coffee and hear more about what you're building. I stared at that message for a long time. I thought about responding. I thought about a lot of things in that moment. I left the request pending. Kennedy didn't reach out first. I think she was waiting to see if it was real, or waiting to figure out what to say. She sent a message on the 4th day. I've been seeing your name everywhere. Congratulations. Genuinely. Short. Clean. No asterisks. I sat with it for a while. There's a version of this story where I responded with something sharp, something that called back to that October dinner, something that let her feel the weight of what she'd said. I thought about it. I won't pretend I didn't. But ultimately I typed back. Thank you. That was all. Because here's the thing, and I mean this without any edge in it. She wasn't wrong when she said what she said. At that dinner table in October, looking at me from the outside, I didn't have anything impressive going for me yet. Not visibly. Not in the way that group measured impressive. She wasn't wrong. She was just cruel about it. And she said it to diminish, not to challenge. There's a difference between someone who sees your potential and pushes you, and someone who sees your ceiling and reminds you of it. She was the second kind, and I was better off building without her watching. The months after the announcement were a blur in the best way. I was traveling more, building the team, presenting the framework to clients who'd been in this industry for 20 years and listening, really listening, to what I was laying out. My firm had given me real resources and real authority. Not the kind that looks good on paper but disappears in execution. Real structural support. I worked harder than I ever had. And it didn't feel like work. Not the way things feel when you're grinding towards someone else's definition of success. It felt like alignment. Like I'd finally stopped walking sideways. About 4 months into the new role, I ran into Colton. Of all of them, Colton was the one I'd thought about least. He was the newest to the group, the one who'd looked at me with that pitying expression at the dinner. We crossed paths at an industry event. He recognized me before I recognized him. He came over, hand extended, smile genuine. "Man," he said, "I have to say, I've been following what you're building. It's seriously impressive." I shook his hand. "Thank you. I feel like I should apologize," he said. "That dinner. October. I remember thinking you seemed. I don't know. I had the wrong read on you." I looked at him. He seemed sincere. "You don't need to apologize," I said. "You didn't say anything." "No," he said. "But I didn't say anything." Which felt about the same, looking back. I appreciated that. More than I expected to. We talked for about 20 minutes. Genuinely, not performatively. He was smarter than I'd given him credit for that night. Less consumed by the group's need to rank everything. He'd just been new to it then, performing the language he'd been handed. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. I want to take a moment here and tell you something I haven't said yet. This story isn't about revenge. I know that's how it might read from the outside. The quiet guy who got dismissed, who went home and built something enormous and proved everyone wrong. There's a version of that in here, yes. But revenge implies that the other person's opinion still holds weight. And somewhere between that October dinner and January's announcement, I stopped needing Kennedy, or Hudson, or Addison, or any of them, to revise their opinion of me. The work was for me. The framework was for me. The promotion was for me. Not for the look on anyone's face. Not for the LinkedIn notifications. Not for Kennedy's 2-word message. I built it because I finally stopped waiting for permission from people who were never going to give it. There's a thing that happens when you exit a relationship where your worth was quietly being eroded, and I want to name it because I think it matters. For a long time after Kennedy, I thought the story was about her. What she said, what she didn't say, what she saw in me or failed to. But the longer I got from it, the more clearly I understood. She was a mirror, not the kind that shows you who you are. The kind that shows you who you've been allowing yourself to be seen as. I had been shrinking. Not dramatically, not in some obvious, noticeable way, but piece by piece, in small adjustments. I had been making myself less, in conversations, in ambition, in the space I took up, because somewhere along the way I had accepted her internal story about me. The grounded one, the quiet one, the one who's great with people but doesn't quite have the flash. I had started living inside that frame. And it takes leaving, actually leaving, not just threatening to realize how much space you'd stopped letting yourself occupy. By summer, the division had its first real win. A major regional carrier implemented the framework across 4 of its distribution networks. The efficiency numbers came back, and they were beyond what I'd projected. My firm shared the results internally. Someone called it a proof of concept. Our CEO called it a preview of where the industry was heading. I sat in a meeting room on a Tuesday afternoon in July, looking at the data on a screen, surrounded by people who were excited, genuinely, not politically, and I thought about that Thursday night in October. The candles, the bread, the soft laugh. I think I'd respect you more if you actually had something impressive going for you. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated in some triumphant way. I just felt clear, like I was looking at a completed thought. I'll tell you where things stand now. It's been almost a year since that dinner. I'm still in the same city. Different headspace entirely. The work is real and ongoing. This isn't a story where I reached the summit and planted a flag. There's more to build, more to prove, more problems to solve. That's not going to stop. Ryder and I have talked about the next phase. There are ideas on the table that are even larger in scope than what's already running. I'm not ready to talk about those yet, but they exist. Easton came to visit last month. We spent an entire weekend going through data, arguing about methodology, ordering bad Thai food at midnight. It was the most alive I'd felt in years. Kennedy, as far as I know, is fine. I have no resentment toward her. I want to say that clearly and mean it. She has her life. I have mine. They diverged. That was supposed to happen. The friends, Addison, Everly, Hudson, I see their names occasionally. Online mostly. Hudson reached out again a few months after the coffee invite. A more direct message this time. He was working on something, thought my perspective might be useful, wanted to meet. I told him I was buried in work, but to check back in a few months. He said he would. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. It matters less than I thought it would. The thing about building something real is that it reorders your sense of what matters. The people who looked past you, you stop needing them to look back. The validation you used to chase, you realize it was always a moving target, designed to stay one step ahead of wherever you were. The noise that once convinced you that you were behind, that you were less than, that your work didn't rise to the level of impressive, it goes quiet. Not because the world got quieter, but because you stopped listening to the wrong frequency. That October dinner ended with me walking out into the cold with nothing but a coat and a clarity I couldn't quite name yet. And I remember standing on the sidewalk for a moment before I started walking. Just standing there, the noise of the city around me, the light from the restaurant window behind me. I remember thinking, something just ended. I didn't know what was beginning. I didn't know about January, about the offer letter, about the VP title, about my name moving across an entire industry overnight, while the same people who'd laughed at that dinner table sent me congratulations they meant and didn't mean at the same time. I didn't know any of it. I just knew I was done. Done with the table. Done with the frame. Done with the quiet, consistent message that who I was and what I was building didn't measure up. I started walking. And I didn't stop. Months later, when those same friends were filling my notifications with congratulations, typing out words like amazing and so impressive and knew you had it in you, I thought about that line again. I think I'd respect you more if you actually had something impressive going for you. And I smiled. Not because I'd proven her wrong, but because the version of me sitting at that table, the one who absorbed that sentence and quietly folded his napkin and walked out without a word, had already known something she didn't. He just needed a few months of silence to build it into something visible. The most dangerous thing someone can do to you isn't insult you loudly. It's make you believe, slowly and quietly, that the standard for impressive is something you'll never reach. I believed it for longer than I should have. But here's what I know now. The work doesn't care who dismissed you. It just asks whether you showed up. I showed up. And that was enough.